Dual Perspectives is a high-impact workshop series designed for early-stage and growth-focused startups. Each session features two expert advisors tackling a single founder-relevant theme, from mindset and learning to vision and execution, offering sharp, contrasting, and complementary viewpoints. Expect candid answers, practical strategies, and no BS wisdom in a fast-paced interactive format. Founders drive the discussion with rapid-fire Q&A, so bring your toughest questions. Nothing is off limits. If you're looking for real talk, fresh perspective, and advisor insight you can actually use, this is the room to be in. Check out Dual Perspectives by signing up for membership today at growthcraft.org/membership. Hello, my name is Hasan Sorrells. This is Tom Libby.
Welcome back, everyone.
And you are listening to the GrowthCraft Podcast, Season 2. Here on the GrowthCraft Podcast, we have designed this show with the startup founder in mind. This podcast is committed to helping you understand and grow your connections to our GrowthCraft advisors, increase your overall engagement with the GrowthCraft community, and of course, grow your knowledge about all of the benefits that GrowthCraft can provide. We can't wait to bring you along on our journey today. Now, here on our show, here on our podcast, we interview founders, advisors, and others about their journey, their process, their project, and of course, their passion. And I'd like to welcome to our show today, Neal Kalechofsky. How are you doing today, Neal?
I'm doing great, Hasan. How you doing?
Excellent. Very good. So for those of us, or for those of our listeners who are listening, who are joining us today, very first question to kick off, as usual, what is it that you do exactly?
Okay, so in a nutshell, I have a consulting company which is called Awardit, and our mission statement is very simple. We maximize our clients' chances of securing non-dilutive funding using the SBIR, STTR grant mechanism. That's what we do.
So Neal, let's go a little bit deeper.
Sure.
I know based on the conversation we had before we hit the recording button, I don't want to prevent you from answering these questions in detail, but so tell us a little bit about the why, right? Like, so why did you start the company? What was the catalyst for like you feeling like this was a path that you felt like you had to take to help people with the SBIR grants?
Yeah, okay, sure. And to do that, I have to go back into a little bit of history.
Go for it.
And so I'll try not to turn this into a 15-minute monologue. But so you guys know, the people listening to this podcast might not know, but you guys know that I'm a physicist in my background and my training. And my particular brand of poison in physics was ultra low temperatures. So in a nutshell, that's getting stuff really, 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 really cold. And for folks like me in the 90s, I was a graduate student in the 90s, there were essentially three career paths coming out of graduate school. There was being an academic, which didn't interest me in the slightest. I come from an academic family. I know that world very, very well. The other was something a lot of listeners today may have heard about, something called quantum computing, which is just emerging into commercial relevance after many years of being fostered by agencies like the NSA and other government. It was essentially on government life support for many, many years, and now private companies are starting to take it up. And if anyone listening is ever interested, I'm happy to talk about quantum computing. But for the sake of this show, I'll just tell you that somewhere inside every quantum computer is something very cold, and that's how people like me would get involved in that technology. And then finally, there was a slightly lesser known growth area, which was called hyperpolarized MRI. And that's where I ended up. And I'm going to condense a lot of years to say I found out about this really principally when I took a job with a company, a private company called Oxford Instruments. They had a program in that area. I eventually ended up running that program on their behalf. Um, and that led to into some intellectual property generation. And again, I'm going to skip over a lot of years to say I ended up taking some of that IP away into a startup. So in the mid to early 2000s, I found myself in a startup with some partners here in the Boston area. And we were looking around for ways to support our company's growth and really to blunt our R&D costs, which were considerable. That's where we needed these very expensive low temperature machines to do what we were doing. And so I have a little joke that I tell guys, and I tell this really to a lot of my clients, which is when you're in a startup and you're looking around for non-dilutive funding, you'll find that there's basically I'll put my fingers on camera, two sources in this world, right? There's your grandparents who love you, right? And think everything you do is fantastic and definitely want to give you money, right? And maybe don't even want equity in return. Or if they do, they take it as kind of a favor, right? But they're not going to do anything with it, right? And then there's the United States government Small Business Innovation Research, or for short, known as the SBIR program. And my grandparents had passed away, so I had to go after SBIR money. So I found myself writing grants to this program, and not to toot my own horn, but I was winning them, and I was saying, "This is fantastic. This is absolutely how all high-tech startups should try to get going," because it was supporting our bottom line. It was injecting money into the company. It was bringing us a lot of cachet with the more traditional dilutive funding sources. It wasn't we weren't giving up a dime of equity in the process, so that was great. And condensing again a lot of years, uh, other people would come to me and say, "Hey, you seem to be kind of good at writing these grants. Maybe you could help us out." And at first it was friends and colleagues, and then it was friends of friends and colleagues of colleagues of colleagues, and you see where this is going. And so in a very organic fashion, there was never like a sort of break point, but there was a point where I said, "Gee, I kind of feel like I should get paid for this, maybe." And I kind of morphed into becoming a consultant in this area. And that originally was a different company called Lighthouse Consulting, and then Lighthouse Consulting eventually became Awarded Consulting, and here we are. So I
So
hope that wasn't too
no, no, no. So
much of a run-on.
the story's the same though, right? So the story is you started doing something, you got really good at it. You started doing it for other people, got really good at it, which basically is the same idea as every tech company that has beta testers. You just did your beta testers under under your own name, and then
Yes,
once
yeah,
you went
yeah.
live, you had the social proof because you had plenty of people that could vouch for you. So like,
Yes, and I had a pretty and in addition, I'll say one other thing, which back when we called our contact list Rolodexes, which no one does anymore, but I had a Rolodex of a lot of talented people who had expertise in, say, some pretty niche scientific areas. So if a client would come in the door and they were doing something in aerospace. Well, I just happen to know people who were aerospace engineers because of the, number of projects I had been involved in over the years. And just, I guess maybe just being alive long enough that I had met, a lot of these people. So it was, and what I found also, and this is a little, and in some ways, when I was originally setting Awarded up, I was almost trying to set it up on an Uber type model, which you might think at first, how could that possibly work? But the way I kind of conceived of it is that there's, if you think of Uber, right? What does Uber do? It takes two pools of people and puts them together, right? People that want to go somewhere and people who have excess ride space, right? Basically, and and it professionalizes it. But Uber doesn't drive you anywhere, right? Uber doesn't even guarantee that you'll like the experience. They're just here's someone who's driving around, they want to drive you somewhere, and here's someone who wants to go somewhere. And originally, I was trying to make SBIR consulting on that uh, sort of on that same rubric where the idea would be, I know a lot of people that have expertise in spare cycles in all these various niche areas, and I also know someone who wants to write a grant in one of those areas. Let's put them together. And that's that's kind of what Award It does, but I could never automate it the way that Uber
Mm.
managed to do. So there is still actual, there's actual humans involved when you're grant consulting, because the ideas are too um, technical and abstract. You can't just send them off to someone with no context. That doesn't work. So
Okay.
yeah,
So there's thank you for that, Neil. Yeah, there's a
sure,
lot there, and I want to unpack a few things in
sure.
there for the benefit of our listeners. So you talked with us about sort of your background, and maybe the first question is how did you take like your IP info? Because I know you're working with a lot of startups who have IP info. There might be in academic institutions. How does your company, how does your consulting, how does that help them basically get funding for that IP to turn that into a startup within an academic framework? How does that happen?
Okay. So that's a great question. And it happens in a number of ways. One thing is you can get direct. Intellectual property is expensive. That's not news to anyone. And so SBIR grants will help to support your intellectual property applications um, uh, up to a certain point. I don't think you can use it for litigation, but you can certainly use it for applying for the patents and and acquiring the patents. And that's often one of the most expensive items on a startup's list, when they're getting started. Certainly if you're in the high tech area, your really cool idea, what stands between that great idea and the big bad world? The U.S. Patent Office, basically, and that's it, right? So that's the lifeblood of, and it was for my startup as well. And if I think if you had gone back and looked at our budgeting way back in the day, you would have seen that IP was very high on the budget list. So the SBIRs can help support that, but I think more importantly, or I'll say equally as importantly, usually what the SBIR grant is paying for, at least at phase one, is proof of concept of that intellectual property. So it's great to have the light bulb idea, but of course, does the light bulb really turn on, right? Does it really work? Does it work into the circumstances that it has to work under? Does it make economic sense? A good phase one project will actually tick all these boxes. And so by the time you get to the end of phase one, you should have both technical and business proof of concept. And that has two very important knock-on effects. First of all, it allows you to apply for phase two, which can be anywhere to 4 to 8 times the money, depending upon the funding agency that we're talking about. The other thing is that it attracts what I call traditional capital, venture capital, because venture capitalists, they love for other people to do their due diligence for them whenever that's possible. Because, well, because everyone likes other people to do it. It's Tom Sawyer, right? Let's get someone else to paint the fence if we possibly can. And in this case, someone else really has painted your fence, because by the time you get to the end of phase one, you know that at least three people who were domain experts in the area went check, check, check on the idea and said, yes, this makes scientific sense, it makes engineering sense, and it makes business sense, at least, from this early vantage point. And in addition, a larger, at least, well, it depends on the agency. So I'll say at least three people have taken a hard look at it and said, yeah, I think this is a good idea. But also by the end of phase one, you have produced presumably some proof that your idea works. And that's a really great position to be in. And then finally, I'll say this, the venture capitalists know very well that if you have won a phase one and you've executed on your aims, your chances of winning a phase two are pretty good. And so they know you're looking at anywhere from one, again, depending upon the agency, $1 to $2.5 million in additional non-dilutive capital that they can essentially use to leverage their investment. So it is a great way of gaining entry into the venture capital or I'm using venture capital loosely to cover all early stage funding. It's really more angel at this stage, whatever term you want to use, private capital.
So shifting gears just a little bit, Neal, because you're talking a little bit about the other entities that are possibly inputting money into these endeavors. Let's take a half a step back real quick as to
Sure.
why, if I'm a startup founder and I'm looking at SBIR, because I mean, for all intent and purpose, grants, I could write my own grant, right? So like anybody can go out there and write their own grant. Your area of expertise is helping companies write the grants better and increase their ability to actually get the funding. So,
Yep.
but why is that? Why am I going to go to somebody like you versus trying to write
It's a
the
great
grant
question.
myself?
Can I give you a baseball analogy?
Yeah,
Will
absolutely,
that
of course.
fly in on this podcast? So, do you guys know what the Mendoza line is in baseball? The Mendoza line is and it changes from year to year, but it's basically the hitting average below which you're out. Right? If you hit
Right.
below the
Yeah.
Mendoza line, you're gone. It doesn't matter how good a fielder you are. You could be the greatest guy in the world. You're a great leader in the clubhouse. Doesn't matter. When you're up at the plate, you are too big a liability. You're gone. Right? And the Mendoza line is somewhere around, and again, it shifts around from year to year, but it'll be anywhere from 150, 140 to 160 batting average. Um, that happens to be about the hit rate statistically for most of the sponsoring SBIR agencies. If you are just an average agency, average company, and you walk in and you write a grant, statistically, your chances of winning are somewhere right around there, say 14 to 16%. Changes from agency to agency and from year to year, and sometimes there's more money and that number goes up, but it's never going to be much above 18 to 20%, no, even in the best of years. So um, the way I like to, you know who the best hitter in baseball was ever? It was
It
Ted
depends
Williams.
on who you ask. I mean,
Oh, it was Ted Williams, Tom, and you know it.
no, no, no. I was gonna say you can say it's Ted Williams because of his that batting average record that still stands, but there are a lot of people that could argue that the game has changed and it's not that's not the barometer anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All true.
Doesn't matter.
All true.
But yes, Ted Williams.
Right. Ted Williams hit 406,
Yeah,
basically
correct.
40% one year. Right. And so what, if you will, our value proposition is who do you want standing at the plate? Mendoza or Ted Williams? Okay. So we
I mean, I
greatly
want Aaron Judge, but that's a different story. Go ahead.
That's exactly. Yes. I
right.
mean, come on. What are we
Right.
doing? But anyway, go
But
ahead.
it's a
Ted
little
Williams.
different in
Ted
SBIR.
Williams.
And
Don't
by
let
the way, I'm
me.
a Red Sox fan, so go
Yeah,
figure.
because the analogy is this, right? You want to hit a home run, but it doesn't matter if it lands on Lansdowne Street or if it just what was that? Who was it the other day who hit a home run? Was it I can't remember, but it just barely fell over the wall. Like it was the shortest home run on record in Fenway or something like that. But to loop back to getting funded. Companies don't care if they win by this much or they win by this much. Okay, they don't care. The point is they get funded and they're on their way through phase one and they're on their way to phase two. So one reason, but I'm going to give you other reasons. One reason people come and work with us is that we improve your likelihood of a successful outcome. That is certainly one big reason. I'd like to say there are other reasons as well. For example, one of the things that we do, and that can range from, it really depends on the client that we're interacting with. There are some clients, for example, if you're working with someone who's a top flight academic at a top flight school, A, they're usually pretty good at writing grants. They had to get to that point in their career. And B, they are absolutely stone cold experts in their particular technology, whatever it is. You're not going to know more than they do, and you're probably not going to add a lot of value to the proposed scientific program. However, there are a lot of clients where actually I think we have added a great deal of value, not only in improving their likelihood of winning a grant, or in fact, getting them to win a grant, but opening up new business avenues and products and opportunities for their technology that they had not considered previously. And so, in those cases, even when they didn't secure a grant, or at least not on the first try, I think they were pretty pleased with the outcome because really it led to opportunities that they hadn't considered before. So when you're a grant consultant, an SBIR grant consultant at least, you're a little bit of everything. I'm a little bit of Tom Libby. I have to be a little bit of a marketing consultant. I have to be a little bit of his son. I have to be a little bit of really of all the other advisors at GrowthCraft. I guess in deference to Paul, I'm never an IT guy. That's not. I'll just call Paul if I need an IT guy. But there's a little bit of all of that because, as you guys know well, a really well-funded value proposition is not just I have a better mousetrap. That's not enough. And it's not enough for SBIR either. And uh, you really find yourself adding value in lots and lots of areas, sometimes lots of unexpected areas. And then I'll finally add one other thing, which is again just down to maybe the Rolodex or having done this for a long time. You can start making connections between what a particular company is doing over here and what some other company is doing over here and saying, hey, these folks make peanut butter and you're making jelly. Has anyone ever thought of making a sandwich? And boom, all of a sudden there's a new value
I was
proposition in the air.
I was
Yeah.
going to ask a
Yeah.
follow-up question, but I think you already answered it, which was pretend they don't get the grant. What is the value add? What is the value? Is there a value that is there
Yeah.
beyond the grant? Which I think you've already answered. So I don't have another. I'll let
Yeah.
Hasan ask the next question.
Sure. Well, I
Yeah.
thank you. I hope we do add value down the line in those areas as well. I think we do. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that add value because that actually tees up something that I want to explore that you also brought up in your previous explanation. So you've used the terms a couple times, phase one and phase two. If I'm a startup, I've never applied for grant funding before. I have no idea. I might know what dilutive and non-dilutive means.
Right.
I liked your analysis or your differentiation between your grandma and the government. Okay, so let's say I'm a startup and I don't have a rich grandma, and so I need to go to the government.
Right.
What is phase one? What is phase two? And how
Right.
does Award It help me get through both of those
Right.
phases? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Great question. So, and the answer, uh, is always there's the answer, and then there's sort of like little caveats on the answer. But basically, seen from 10,000 feet, Hassan, the SBIR program is split into two phases. Phase one is considered the light bulb or the proof of concept stage. It's usually less money, somewhere between $200 and $300,000 typically, and 6 months. And the idea there is in that very short, targeted project, you are going to reach some inflection point. Sometimes I call it a wow moment, where I like to say the robot talked, the drug worked, the rocket went up in the air, right? Whatever it was that you said it was going to do, it did, right? And then and that's enough to justify going on to phase two, where here the money starts to change a bit. Over at the NSF, for example, it might be I think it's $1.25 million for phase two, whereas over at the NIH, it could be considerably more, almost 2x that. Which by the way makes sense because of course medical technology is much more expensive typically in the latter phases than the technology that the NSF is promoting and the businesses that are in its portfolio. So, but what's happening in phase two is you might be demonstrating scalability. So, okay, you made the drug work once, but can it work over and over again? If this was a medical technology, you might be proceeding through regulatory approval stages. You might not get there all the way through phase two, but you're proceeding down that path. You might be demonstrating, for example, commercial acceptance if this was some kind of artificial intelligence algorithm. You want to see that, people are taking it up and using it, or some new social media app, or something like that. So phase one is kind of the wow phase. Phase two is the demonstrated all scales, but there's kind of bleed over between the two, because you don't want to. One of the things I say when you're writing these grants, don't pile all your wow into phase one, because if you've done everything cool and interesting in phase one, that can leave phase two kind of bland and flat. And even with the best of programs, only about 50% go on to phase two. So you can fail at the phase one to phase two transition. And one of the reasons people fail, or don't make that leap, is sometimes because phase two is, the reviewers are like, this is like nothing. What are we paying? What are we paying for? Maybe, okay, you've demonstrated it. Go into the marketplace. You don't need us anymore. But that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear that you want that extra $2 million in non-dilutive funding. So that's one phase two. One last thing I want to say for anyone listening to this who might be in medical technology, it's very easy to confuse phase one and phase two at SBIR with the phases of FDA regulatory clearance, because they're called the same thing. And that can sometimes lead to some confusion on people's parts. But as far as SBIR is concerned, think of it as initial shot of money, 6 months, that's phase one, larger shot of money, maybe up to 2 years. That's phase two.
So turning a corner here before we wrap up, because I know we're probably going slightly over, which is fine. We have no problem with going a little bit over. But talk a little bit about GrowthCraft and why why GrowthCraft's important to you, and why there's a mutually beneficial relationship between yourself and Award It and GrowthCraft.
Sure. Well, that's easy, Tom, because I'll say for the listeners what I told you when we first met. Right. Which is, if GrowthCraft hadn't existed, I would have had to invent it in the sense that I was grant consulting is great, and it's an important component. A non-dilutive funding is great, and it's an important component for some businesses, not all businesses. For example, if anybody out there on the podcast who might be doing fintech, probably I'm not the guy to talk to, because it's very, very difficult to raise. I have, of course, little one-liners for everything, and the one-liner for that is, what are you talking to me for? You should be talking to Jeff Bezos, right? If you have a fintech play, go talk to Bill Gates, go talk to Elon Musk. You're not going to raise money. Very unlikely you're going to raise money via SBIR. But and Hassan knows, and really probably most of your listeners know, that's just it's just the initial fuel in the rocket. There's so much more that goes into getting the rocket off the launch pad and aimed at its target. And that's a very diverse set of skills that my clients typically need, right? They are one or two very, very smart people. Very, very, if you said, tell me your average, client, I would say, well, highly educated in their domain, okay? Spent most of their lives in this particular expertise, have this really, really cool idea, and probably very little experience in everything else that it takes to build a business. So they're not good at sales and marketing. They really don't have any idea how to build a corporate culture. They probably don't have sometimes the background legal expertise to make some fundamental decisions about their corporate structure, or, for example, how to negotiate. So let me finish the sentence. How to negotiate intellectual property. A lot of intellectual property. I always call this the uh-oh moment, right? Where you have someone who came up with this really cool idea when he was a professor at pick your favorite university, whatever. And they will come to me and they'll say, I invented this, really cool robot. And now I want to build a business around it. And I'll say, oh, that's terrific. Is there a patent? Yes, of course there's a patent. Do you own the patent? Yes, I do own the patent. And I'll say, do you? And that's, and they'll say, well, I invented it. And I go, no, that's not the same thing, right? I go, where were you sitting? I always like to say this. Where were you sitting when you came up with the idea for this really cool robot? Well, I was sitting at MIT or Harvard or Yale or Stanford or, pick your university. And I go, well, then they own it. And that's always a tough moment. And so there's always, there's that kind of expertise needed to either negotiate the license out or maybe to develop a new patent. And also, frankly, to do this without spending a ton of money. And that's where someone like Gil, I think, adds a lot of value because you can solve a lot of intellectual property problems if you're willing to just open the fire hose of money and turn a lawyer loose on it. But you will be aghast at how much that will cost, right? Very, very quickly. And so, what Gil excels at is developing these kinds of uh, um, uh, intellectual property stratagems that don't cost an arm and a leg, which I think is fantastic. But also finance, someone like JP, all these other diverse skill sets that I think go into building a viable startup that can go on to, really become a stand-up business. And I was looking around. The analogy in my mind was like a mall, right? Like SBIR could be one of the corner stores in the mall. But you come to the mall for all the other stuff, right? That's also there as well. So maybe SBIR money draws you in, and I get that. Non-dilutive money is very attractive, and that's fine. But you rapidly find, hey, I also need a hammer, and I also need something, some clothing, and I also need this, that, the other thing. And so the idea of getting this diverse skill set, uh, uh, bringing this to my clients and saying, "Hey, you have access to all of this of all of this information for, I mean, not a lot of money." I think is very attractive. So, no, I'm not joking. I was actually thinking of doing something like this when you and I met, Tom, and I said, "Oh, it already exists. That's way easier. I'll just do that."
It's way easy to become part of the mall and
Yeah,
get built
yeah,
onto the mall than to
yeah.
build your own mall,
Oh yeah, I'd much rather just
complex.
drive
Yeah,
to the mall
to
than
go to the
build
mall.
a mall, right?
Right.
And you're right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
also, of course, GrowthCraft has an online presence, and I think you guys know I have. Um, I'm not the guy to do that. So, so all I
Well,
know is it
I
can be
like
done.
to I like to I like to compare my seat at here at GrowthCraft to the Cinnabon at the mall. So there you go. That's the part of the mall that you go to,
Hey man,
and
people
then you
like
feel
Cinnabon.
people do like Cinnabon. That's what I'm saying. People love Cinnabon,
You
and then they
can't, you
walk away and
can't,
they feel guilty afterward. And they don't know why they
you
ate
can't
that.
take Cinnabon
Is
because
that
I
the
was
Haysan
thinking,
experience? You want the guilt afterwards? Is that
Well,
the...
I mean, I was raised a good old Catholic in the past, so yeah. I mean,
you
there you
you can
go. Yeah.
take
It's right.
you can take Cinnabon because if you ever notice, like, so I was thinking sales and marketing was basically the food court, right? The whole food court, because if you think of sales and there's so many different disciplines of marketing and sales kind of, but it all sits in one spot, right? Sales
Right.
is one spot. So I was
Right.
the food court. Cinnabon's never in the food court, if you ever notice.
It's never the food
On the
court. Yeah,
side somewhere.
that's right. That's right. It's got its own spot. That's
Anyway,
right.
all right.
Oh my gosh.
Why don't you finish us up here?
Yeah, let's wrap this up. So Neal, thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for coming on the
Thanks for
Growth
having me.
Craft podcast. We really appreciate it. This is an insight into an area that, quite frankly, I didn't even know existed before you came on board here at GrowthCraft. And I always find out something new whenever you talk about SBIR, STTR, and what you're doing with Awarded. So, for those of us who are listening, for our listeners, where can we find you? Where can we get in contact with you? How can we connect with you? If I'm a startup founder, how do I get connected with you to explore more of this, more of these non-dilutive funding opportunities with
Sure.
Awarded?
Well, thank you, Asan. I appreciate that. I was going to make a joke about saying we can just put a bat signal up in the sky and I'll show up. But but no, that's not really going to work. So We have a website, so you can visit our website. It's awarded.sbirconsulting.com, awarded.net. And that's certainly one way of finding us. Or you can, anybody that's out there, if you want to drop me an email at neal@awarded.net, and that's Neal. I know most people spell it Neil, but my mom had to be a little bit different, so she spelled my name with an A. So Neal@awardit, awardit.net. And I love to talk to new startups. I think it's the most fun. It's a world of smart ideas, and there's so many interesting things going on out there. So, if I can help you, point you in the right direction, whether it's non-dilutive funding or whether you're better off going another direction, that's great. I love to hear about everything that's going on.
Awesome. So we will have links to the Awarded website. We'll have Neal's email contact, and of course, we will have the link to Neal's LinkedIn profile in the show notes below the player of the podcast provider that you are listening to this podcast on right now. So check out those show notes and get connected with Neal and with all of the other GrowthCraft advisors. And thank you for listening today to the GrowthCraft podcast. Once again, my name is Hassan Sorrells. This is Tom Libby, and well,
So long.
we're out.
Bye, everyone.